right? Like I can find you research that says, these are some of my favorite. This is an actual study. It's out of the University of Chicago. If you are a white male and you train more than 9 hours a week, I believe it's 9 hours. It's more than the recommended limit, right? You are 81% more likely to die of some heart-related issue than if you were black. That's a real study.
How did
You're like, what? It's like 20 years of follow-up. That's a real study. And the headline on these is, if you overexercise as a white guy, you might die. You're like, wait, what? And I go and look at it and I'm like, just because data says something doesn't mean you need to report it, right? Like maybe that's one you look at it and you go, this might not be right. Maybe we shouldn't publish this. Like I understand we did a bunch of work for this, but maybe we shouldn't publish it just because we can. And so like, I always go back to that one and I'm like, are you telling me as a white dude, I have an 81% increased risk of dying from some heart disease because I exercise a lot versus a black guy? Like, come on. Like at some point we'd have to have a little bit of common sense.
Years ago, there was a thought that suggested that the high endurance athletes don't live as long. They all end up having heart problems. And now it's showing the opposite. So it's like what one thing says today ain't what it is tomorrow. I mean, when I was younger and we trained our balls off, lifting heavy was the only way to get fast. The only way to get fast. Get super strong, that's how you get super fast. And bro, we talked to some of these guys that are coaching some of the fastest guys in the world. Yeah, sometimes they lift heavy. Majority of their stuff is all fast lifting. All fast, all light. A lot of guys don't even lift. You know what I mean? Like it's so everything's cyclical. You know, it.
Well, you remember the early 2000s of track, right? Like the Donovan Baileys, the Michael John, they were all absolutely yoked. Yep. Now, granted, they were all roided out of their minds, but you had bodybuilders running, sub 10-second hundreds. And now it's like, now people are like, yeah, we don't really need to do that. Looks good, but we don't need to. See, like, it's going to change. Yeah. Like, new research is going to come out. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the research says when you're the one dealing with yourself, right? Like, I can go find you a story of somebody who lived to 110 years old, smoked a pack a day, and drink scotch every day.
Yeah,
that right? Does that right? Like, had they listened to studies, they might be dead by. It's at the end of the day, it only matters what happens to you, right? Yep. I can eat the best diet in the world. I can exercise perfectly. I can do everything they say and get cancer and die at 45.
Yeah.
Or I can do nothing that they say is correct and live to be 110.
And also the people that are eating maybe perfectly, but they're stressing so much about every single thing that they're eating. Maybe it's not all going to end up well for them either.
Yeah, I think environmental factors are just as important, right? Like the blue zones are a giant scam. Like, I don't know if you guys have looked into any of the research that came out on those, but there is something to be said about the socioeconomic, like, culture that they have, right? It's more laid back. They walk places. They're not in super hurries all the time. Family is important. Friends are important. Meals are like a cultural thing. So you like sit there longer and you don't eat it as fast and you make it with home ingredients. And like, that is just as important, right? Versus, am I eating 15 grams of fiber a day, or am I eating 112 grams of protein, or is my saturated fat going over 6.8% of my daily intake? Like, we want to get super crazy about all of these things, but you hit it on the head. Like, if you love your life and you don't have a ton of stress, you're probably going to have lower blood pressure. You're probably going to live longer, regardless of everything else that you do.
Mm-hmm. What's your cheat sheet, Jason? What's your, like, with what you've learned, what's like the core tenets of your message for people?
Get rid of processed food. Like, I think, and I'll say processed food, and then, some smart ass on the internet will go, well, technically the moment you pick an apple from a tree, it becomes processed. I'm like, we know what we're talking about. Ultra processed foods. Everybody knows what we're talking about. Get rid of it. Right? Like, I think that's the single, whether you go vegan, or carnivore or somewhere in between, get rid of it just for the fact that you'll feel better. Like you will instantly feel better. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's the seed oils or the additives or the food dyes or the added sugars or whatever it is. Get rid of ultra processed food and literally 95% of your problems will be gone, right? You won't have added sugars in, you won't have additives, you won't have dyes, preservatives. And then all of a sudden you can go, okay, now I can start tweaking, right? Like, what if I remove this? Will I feel even better? Cool. Let's keep doing that. What if I remove this? What if I add a little more of that? But that's, I honestly don't care what people want to eat. Like, if you want to eat vegan and that makes you healthier, fantastic. But just get rid of processed foods. Like, nobody can convince me that there's any benefit to them whatsoever.
So it's funny that you say that because I recently did a 60-day study on myself and I just got the blood work today. I eat whatever the fuck I want, absolute anything at any point in time. I try not to eat too late, but as long as I make it from scratch, everything is single ingredient. For the past 60 days, I've lost 8 pounds. I eat ice cream, either ice cream or marshmallows every single night. Every single night I do whatever. And we're going to see what my blood work comes back as. I'm stronger. My resting heart rate is a little bit lower. Like I wake up in the morning. We do homemade bread. I do homemade pasta. I import all my wheat from Italy. And if you look at the back of a wheat package now, a flour package in the United States, even if it's organic, it's not just flour. It's flour and this and that and that and that. It dries. I'm like, what the fuck? So I import all our stuff, and the only source of like simple sugar that I have is either from fruits or maple syrup. And I use syrup as a sweetener when I do the ice cream. My ice cream is heavy cream, vanilla extract, like the vanilla bean stuff, some whole milk, some salt, and maple syrup and egg yolks. Like and it is. Oh, and we do chocolate. I do cacao. It is insane. It's so good. And I have open face steak sandwiches for breakfast. I made my own cream soda. It's delicious. Like everything from scratch. I do whatever the hell I want. I feel great. I love it. I'm like, I'm upset that I'm doing the carnivore in January because I really like this diet so much. But like, I'm pumped to do to get on board with the carnivore again. But I'm with you, dude. I think the ultra processing stuff, like it's no good. It's just ruining anything that causes GI distress. Even if you're having protein, right? You remember the J-Rob protein, the J-Rob egg white protein?
Oh yeah,
bro, blowing up my bathroom. Everyone knew whenever the hell I had the J-Rob protein. Anything that causes GI distress, where extra gas, smelly gas, something wrong with your stomach, it's causing malnourishment. It's impacting the way you're absorbing macro and micronutrients. So do whatever doesn't cause that. Listen to your body, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And you'll also find that the big thing I noticed when I was going to the ultra processed route is I could eat forever. Yeah. Forever. I'm not even hungry. And I'm like, yeah, I could eat some more. Or it's like, oh, I have a few calories left. Yeah, no big deal. You start going single ingredient stuff, you're full. And now it does not matter how good it tastes. I just don't want anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm good. And I think part of the issue is we try to compartmentalize all of these ingredients. Well, we tested MSG and MSG is not a problem. We tested, Red 40 and Red 40 is not a problem. We tested aspartame and it's not a problem. You have to drink 12 cans of Coke a day, right? It's not a problem. Okay, well, what if it's a little bit of MSG and a little bit of Red 40 and a little bit of aspartame and a little bit of all of these things? And guess what? They all add up. And then you have issues with your water, and then you have pollutants in the air, and just on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And what if it's just a little bit of all of that? We're not getting healthier. We have atrocious health in this country. And I saw somebody post They're like, oh, we have bad health. Look at how life expectancy has gone up. Okay, cool. The two biggest factors, the biggest factor with life expectancy is socioeconomic status. Right? Like if you want a correlation, socioeconomic status and life expectancy, we're number one in the world in GDP by a mile. Right? We're like 60th in the world in life expectancy. There's only two other countries in the world that have such big discrepancies, and it's South Africa and Russia. Not exactly the models of having long life. We have a problem, right? We spend twice as much money on healthcare as per person as the second number two country. We spend way more money on health and fitness than any other country in the world. We own 50% of the R&D market of pharmaceuticals in the world, all coming from the United States. And yet we don't live long, right? We live like 6 years less than Canada. Like, what is going on? It's our freaking food. Like, you can't tell me it's not our food. Now, yes, we make
European and you come into America, it is shocking how many fat people you see. Like, I know, like, everyone talks about it, but it really is like, you're like constantly looking around like, oh my God, look, and it hurts, especially when you see how fat the kids are. Like little young kids looking exactly like their parents. And it has to be of course, it's the food. I feel like shit after I go to Mike and me and him eat like a pig for a week. I feel terrible. I gain weight like nothing else. I think I get a belly after 2 weeks with you.
Yeah, like it's now granted, we make poor decisions, right? We make poor decisions with our food. We don't exercise enough. We don't move enough. All of these things. At the end of the day, it's still our problem. But when your food supply is 70% ultra processed food, 70% of our food is ultra processed. And then you wonder why we have morbid obesity rates. We have diabetes going through the roof. We have cancers going through the roof. We have, everything's getting younger too, right? It's not the 60s and 70-year-olds people having heart disease. It's the 30 and 40-year-olds. It's not people in their 70s having cancer. It's kids. Like kids' cancer rates are going through the roof. Autism, Down syndrome, like all of these things. You're like, okay, there has to be something. You can't just say, oh yeah, we're just getting sicker, right? Like there's something there, right? And is there something to be said for environmental stuff that's going on? Sure. All of the microplastics that they're finding in literally everything, heavy metals and everything. But it's a combination. Like, and you can't tell me that the more we process food, the better it gets for us. Like that's trying to, whether you're religious or not, that's trying to play God. That's saying, you know what? I can do it better. And I'm just going to process the shit out of this. And it's somehow going to be either the same or better. Yeah. No, I don't believe that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with that. Change speeds just a little bit, going back to the carnivore specifically. What bad things have you noticed from the carnivore? So I'll go first. Growing up, I always said I was allergic to fruits and vegetables. Doctor always said, "Oh, you got any allergies?" I said, "Fruits and vegetables," and they'd always laugh. I said, "No, seriously. Like when I eat cantaloupe, my mouth itches. Honeydew, mouth," and I loved it. I used to house it. Sometimes when I would have walnuts, my mouth would itch. Or like I'd get like congested or something like that, even at a young age. Now, did I have a food allergy back then? No, it wasn't a food allergy. Back then it was like, shut up and eat your vegetables. First time I did carnivore, when I was very, very strict, I did literally meat only. I tried to do nose to tail, eating liver, eating all the bullshit that, before I realized how I could go about doing it. It was when carnivore pretty much first came on the scene, like popularly. I was before COVID. And I started reintroducing foods a little bit more. It was walnuts. My mother-in-law had cooked me candied walnuts. She made us candied walnuts with spice and like a little sugar. And I had one. I was like, oh, this is delicious. This is great. I ate half the jar, which was, a cup of walnuts. I was keeled over in pain. Anaphylaxis. Now my throat didn't close or anything. I was shitting mucus. I was insane with pain, keeled over for 4, 6, at least 4 hours of intense pain, legitimate 4 hours. I thought I had to go to the hospital, like something is wrong. And I talked to one of my classmates at the time who was a pulmonologist, a 25 career pulmonologist, and we were BS. And she goes, no, drink a ton of water, flush it out of your system, you'll be fine. Don't go to the doctor. There's nothing they're going to do. So I did that, waited out. So how I look at it is, I want to be healthy, but I want to be optimal. And the last time that I came off carnivore is because my daughter learned how to say pizza, and she loves Pizza Fridays. Pizza Fridays are her favorite thing in the world. And it's, as a result, it's my favorite thing in the world. And when I reintroduced those foods, I didn't feel that great. Now I can have some things that would cause GI distress when I was coming off carnivore, and I'm not affected by it, right? Like maybe I'll have a little thing here and there, but now, as far as I'm concerned, if there's an apocalypse and all that's left are Doritos or walnuts, like I'll be okay. You know what I mean? So my negative is from it is it's an elimination diet. You feel great, sure, but you try to reintroduce something and your body's not used to absorbing it. That's like, to me, that's a no-no. I don't want to say a no-no. That's just a downside to me. You know what I mean? What negatives have you noticed from being on carnivore now for 2 years, 2.5 years? Like when you started doing your other diet again, what did you notice?
So I think carnivore exposes issues that your body's been covering up, right? Like this is first semester anatomy and physiology. One thing that I will literally never forget is Wolff's Law. And Wolff's Law is usually it's in regards to bones. It's how people would identify what line of work somebody was in, right? And Wolff's Law is the body adapts to changes that are placed upon it. And so you would see this in laborers would have, thicker lower leg bones because they're constantly under this pressure. And so changes in your bone structure could give indication as to what you did for a living. And it adapts to almost everything in the body. I think our bodies have gotten really good at getting by with less than optimal, right? Like you eat a bunch of pizza, you're like, okay, am I great all the time? No. Do I feel okay? Sure. You get rid of it, you start feeling a lot better, and then you try to reintroduce it and you feel terrible. And your body's like, yeah, we don't do that anymore. Right? Like I spent a really long time like trying to overcome this. And now part of it is your gut microbiome changes, right? Like as you do it, your gut microbiome, and now all of a sudden I am not as equipped to handle these things that might have caused me problems before, but I've just kind of gotten used to it. I've actually had the opposite. I don't have a problem coming off of carnivore. I can cheat, right? I don't normally because I don't feel that great, but I tried to do an animal-based experiment. I'm always changing, right? Like there's some people that do strict carnivore and they'll do it strict carnivore for the rest of their lives because they have something going on. There's some autoimmune condition. There's some reason that they need to be. I don't, right? I don't need to be carnivore. I was animal-based first and I felt totally fine animal-based. I just feel a little bit better carnivore, right? Like I sleep just a little bit better. I have just a little better mental clarity. I'm a little more even keel on my energy. That's why I'm carnivore. I don't have to. I can go, like I tried to do this animal-based experiment and reintroduce a few carbs before. All it did was make me crave junk food. And I'm like, I'm bulking, so whatever. I've just been eating like an asshole the last 2 months, right? And it's not that bad, right? Like my digestive is a little bit worse. I know that my mental's a little bit worse. And then that kind of frustrates me because I'm like, I know I could be, if I just go back to strict carnivore, I'll be fine, which I am beginning of January. Like my experiment's done and I'm done with it. But I think the negatives are your body's no longer compensating for the bad decisions that you made, right? If that makes sense, right? The other example that I use of how good our body is adapting to what we have is, do you know that panda bears are not actually originally herbivores? Panda bears are originally carnivores. But they adapted because that was the food source that they have. But the reason they have to eat for 16 hours a day is because they don't absorb the bamboo very well. So they have to eat a ton. That's why they're lethargic and fat and right. They're not supposed to be herbivores, but they can be, right? Like normally you wouldn't think if you took a lion and put them in a wheat field, right? Lion's going to die. You would think that, right? Well, that's basically what happened. Like a panda bear is a carnivore and they got stuck in a jungle and they're like, well, I guess I better figure out how to eat trees. Right. So like, granted, this is over a long, process of, generations and generations and adaptations, but our body is really good at that. There's a tribe out in Southeast Asia that can hold their breath. They're born with the ability to hold their breath for over 10 minutes because they discovered that the majority of their food was from the sea and they had to dive deeper and deeper to get it. And they built up this ability. You would think it's a skill, but it started being passed on to their generations. Now, a kid just pops out of the womb and able to hold their breath for forever. It's these physiological adaptations that we go through. And when you've been exposed to this stuff for years and years and years, your body learns how to handle it. And I think carnivore starts to change everything. And then you try to reintroduce those foods and your body's like, no, man, we don't like that. Like, stop. Don't do that anymore. And so I think that could be a negative for people because it becomes like traditional stuff. Like, well, I want to eat mom's cinnamon rolls, or I want to eat mom's, pumpkin pie, and you fundamentally change so many things that now you just don't feel good. And so that can be a negative, but that's like all of the positives that most people get. If there's some drawbacks, I think it's worth it for most people.
So we were talking about excrement before, and one thing that I noticed is you don't poop nearly as much when you're on carnivore. And a lot of people experience what they think is constipation, but they really don't have to go. They're just used to it. It's like, hey, this is the time of day where I normally poop, and like, yeah, no, I just don't have to. My thought process on that is because of the high bioavailability of meat, the meat will kind of chill, and you'll use all of it. You'll use That's why I only buy into the 0.55 grams per kilogram of body weight, or whatever the hell it is, or 0.55 grams per pound of body weight for kilogram body weight for optimal protein absorption or maximal protein absorption. I only buy that if you have a mixed diet. And the reason why is I think the carbohydrates and the fiber prematurely add bulk by pushing things out before they're digested. And if you think, and I hate when people are like, oh, when we were cavemen, but how often, you find a berry patch, you eat all the berries. You find the animal, you eat the animal. How often did they eat berries with animals? Right? Like it's the cross digestion is what prematurely pushes things out. And I came to this conclusion through my problem with moderation and fresh mozzarella. So, so when I would eat fresh mutz, I can literally sit down and, bro, I can have 2 pounds of mutz in a sitting, think nothing of it, and I'll be perfectly fine. Now, I'll be constipated for a day or so if I fast afterwards. But if I don't fast, I'll shit white. Like, what? Why? But if I don't fast and then I give my body time to absorb it and digest it, normal colored shit. And at first when it happened, I thought I had cancer. I Googled it. I was like, gray shit. Like, no, fucking no, But I think a lot of that has to do with our the proteins, the meat's high ability to absorb nutrients, and it literally all of it, like the nutrients, virtually 100% of the meat and everything, as long as you're not pushing the fiber through. Now, that being said, if you want to lower your LDLs, taking psyllium husk is a no-brainer. It's like a shortcut. It'll raise HDLs and it'll lower LDLs. It's like a cheat code. So you just take a tablespoon. I'll do a tablespoon of psyllium husk and just chug water with it not almost every morning, but multiple times a week. And it adds bulk to your stool and you end up pushing it out. Do you do anything for fiber? Do you give a shit about fiber?
I'm way better without fiber. Where like I've had digestive, not like to the case of IBS, but digestive type issues my entire life. Right? Nothing to the point where it's bad enough for me to go see somebody. But I tried fiber supplements. I tried anything, everything, just because I'm always looking for more optimal, right? Like I don't like just being like, yeah, it's okay. Like it's not a problem. I'm like, man, can I make it better? And so I have not been constipated a single time since starting carnivore. I got constipated when I did the standard American diet. Bad, to the point that I had to take a laxative. Like when I went through that drastic shift of going strict carnivore to the strict standard American, I had to take a laxative like 3 or 4 days in, because I was like, dude, I'm like, this is bad. Like I'm like keeled over constipated. Like not like I'm not going to the bathroom, like pain constipation. And I really think you need fiber if you're eating carbohydrates, right? Like you just look at nature. There's almost, outside of honey, there's really no natural source of carbohydrates that does not also have fiber. Not even sugarcane. Like you got to go through all of the fibrous exterior to get sugarcane. Maple syrup's housed in a fucking tree. It's literally all fiber. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I think fiber becomes so important, is when you are overloading with carbohydrates. And we are really good at taking fiber out of everything, right? Now I'm just going to extract the sugar part of it and leave the fiber to go. So that's why we end up with these diets where we have all these problems. We're not getting enough fiber. You eat 50% of the American diet's carbohydrates. The average American eats like 3,700 calories a day, right? Like you want to do some simple math. You're eating almost 500 grams of carbs a day, and most of it's coming from added sugars. So yeah, of course we have a fiber problem, right? Like we eat bullshit carbohydrates and a lot of them, and we don't eat fiber. 99% of the studies that show all of the positive effects of fiber are because you're replacing BS carbohydrate sources with sources that have carbohydrates, or with that carbohydrate sources that have fiber, right? You're replacing your Twinkies with vegetables, fiber and carbs. You're replacing your fruit juice, which has all the fiber removed out of it, with whole fruits. Now you have your sugar and carbs together. So that's where I think fiber is important. I don't think fiber is important just as a standalone supplement for the majority of people. I'm actually worse. I've taken a couple supplements that just unintentionally had fiber in them, and almost always I can tell it's a little bit worse. Now, is that for everybody? No, I'm not saying that. But I think we've become so enamored with this idea of fiber. Like you have to have fiber. You add, the group that has 30 grams of fiber or more has a 50% lower chance of heart disease. Sorry, it's not your supplement of fiber. It's your food choices. It's your lifestyle choices. People eat fiber are less likely to smoke. They're more likely to exercise. They're right. Like they typically have lower BMIs. They have better blood sugars, better insulin. So the fiber thing is really funny to me, because a lot of people do really well without fiber, and it actually clears up a lot of diet. And there's studies on it, right? That's not just a bunch of anecdotal evidence. There's studies on how reducing fiber, that's what FODMAP diets are, right? Reducing fiber intake can help with IBS, constipation, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was not IBS. When the intestinal line gets what's it called, the pouches, and they get inflamed. What
Talking about Crohn's?
No. Way less than that. But anyway, diverticulitis and diverticulosis. That's what it is. Adding bulk to the stool actually causes, like high fiber. It has been more associated, I believe. I believe it's been more associated. High fiber has been more associated with that than most other things. and it irritates. It causes flame ups with a lot of people. So you've had what made you do the carnivore diet?
So I got dad bod, right? Like I was a college athlete. I did amateur bodybuilding through my 20s. Like every single day of my 20s, whether I was bulking or not, I had abs, right? Like every single day of my 20s. And then I got married, was working 60 hours a week, had 2 kids, little kids, and started gaining weight, right? And so then I move and I realize I'm like 25 pounds overweight. Like I got to stop this. And so what's super funny is if you look up people who are anti-carnivore, like they're the only reason you had success on carnivore is you removed all the processed junk you're eating. Your diet was shit before, you got rid of it. That's why you had success. Well, I removed all of it. I did Whole30, which is, kind of like you were saying, single ingredient stuff. Nothing out of a package, nothing pre-made, made all my stuff, ate a lot of veggies, ate a lot of fruit, lean meats, your Mediterranean diet, right? Like the best you can do. And I lost weight, but I didn't feel any better. I just didn't feel better. I was like, man, this is dumb. I went 90 days, no cheats, no alcohol, nothing. And I didn't feel good. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like I literally just suffered through 90 days. I don't like vegetables. I forced myself to eat vegetables, all of these things. I was taking a fiber supplement, and I don't feel any better. Sure, I lost some weight, but I don't feel better. So I said, fuck this. And I gained it all back in like 3 weeks. Like literally I was like, screw this. If I'm going to feel terrible, I might as well just eat something that I enjoy. Right. I was going hungry every night, like just terrible. And then I went to Vegas for an anniversary trip. And like for probably the first time in my life, I was like, I don't feel comfortable with my shirt off at the pool. I don't like this. And, my wife had been sending me Paul Saladino stuff. She's like, he's quirky. He's a little out there. Just try it. And I was like, you're telling me I can eat fatty red meat and fruit and no vegetables? Sold. I'm in. Like, okay, cool. And I instantly felt better. And by instantly, like within a couple days, like, and I will equate that up to removing vegetables and removing seed oils. And I can straight up tell you, I can go to a restaurant right now, eat a steak, and I can tell you if they cooked it with seed oils, just based on how I feel. It's not drastic. Like I'm not on the floor. I'm not like, my night's not ruined, but it's just different. Like I can immediately tell a little bit of like the digestive distress. I'm like, yeah, no, that's a little bit of seed oils. So I immediately started feeling better, lost a bunch of weight, had a bunch of energy, was sleeping better. And then decided, again, it was the quest for, can I be a little bit better? I had no reason to go full carnivore. But I was like, man, could I be just a little bit better? And so I was like, I'm basically, like 50 to 100 grams of carbs a day. It's not going to be a big deal just to cut it out. I'd always been hesitant because, and you could probably speak to this as a former athlete or as an athlete, I had to eat all the time, all the time. I ate right before games. I ate during games. I ate the middle of double headers. I ate during the second doubleheader. I ate after doubleheaders. Because if I went too long without eating, I would get that like low blood sugar, right? Like start to feel shaky and then you're fucked, right? Later you're in trouble. I was the guy that ate right as I went to the workout floor, right? Like put it down, go work out. Because if I went longer than 30 minutes between my last meal and the gym, starting my lifting session, I was in trouble. And so that's what I was afraid of. I was like, man, like, I don't think I can give up these last carbs because like that's a miserable way to live. And then I gave it up and I had no problems and I became like truly fat adapted. And I'm like, this is life changing. Like this is the single biggest changer for me. And the story I always tell is I went to get my sleeve, my tattoo sleeve. And the guy's like, all right, let's plan for 6 to 8 hours. And my first thought was, what the fuck am I going to eat? Like, what am I going to eat? Am I going to bring food? Am I going to like have a break? Like, how am I going to eat? Should I bring bars? Should I? And then I went, wait a minute. No, I'm fine. It's cool. And I had like a chiropractor appointment before. So I ate, a decent sized meal at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I got home at like 6 o'clock at night and did not have a problem whatsoever. Not one time was I like, man, I need food. I was hungry when I got home, but I had no issues. And like in a tattoo chair would be the number one like bad place to have issues with blood sugar, right? Like your adrenaline's just going and you have low blood sugar, you're in for a bad time. But that fat adaptation, like man, that was game changer for me.
What specifically are you going to eat like then from January? Like, what does your carnivore look like when you're strict carnivore?
So I mainly eat beef. I get this all the time. Like a lot of my stuff will be beef, and they're like, "But do you not like? What about pork? What about?" I just don't like it as much. Right? I don't like chicken. I have eaten so much chicken and rice in my life that I just don't want chicken. I just don't want it. I don't eat a ton of pork either, so mostly beef. It's the most cost effective. It tastes the best to me. So I eat a lot of beef. I will eat some eggs, and I will eat butter and cheese. I do eat cheese, but that's my strict carnivore. Usually a pound of ground beef, a pound of some kind of fattier steak, a little bit of butter, some cheese, and maybe some eggs if I'm still hungry.
So I want to, because I'm absolutely doing carnivore, and I'm trying to, so I'm like religious too. And last year I had done this thing called Exodus 90, where for 90 days, I was deep diving into it. And part of it was fasting on Wednesdays from meat and fasting on Fridays from meat. And I was thinking about doing something similar to that. And then every Friday, just either every Wednesday or every Friday, just have a ton of sashimi or some shit and just launch and just eat a ton of it. Um, One thing I noticed when I was doing carnivore the second time around, I stopped losing. I wasn't like losing that much weight. I didn't understand why. And then I introduced one fasting day. And as soon as I fasted for 24 hours, I don't know what the hell happened, but it kicked everything into overdrive and the weight just started melting off. I guess it was just that little bit of caloric deficit added to the entire equation that put everything over the edge. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was awesome. Um, with the seed oils, I want to ask you. I grew up. I went to nutritionists. I loved studying nutrition. I thought I was going to do nutrition at some point. And I used to take spoonfuls of sunflower oil or safflower oil or flaxseed oil. That's what it was, flaxseed oil or sunflower seed oil. And it wasn't looked at as bad for you then. Is it now? I some of the seed oils, like the rapeseed extract and this all that shit. Like I can understand. There's multiple reasons as to why the seed oils are bad. One is from how they're harvested, right? It's one of the biggest sources of GMOs, right? Even and it ruins the environment. Like the palm oil, right? Like it's some of the worst things you can do for the environment. So I could understand ethically, and even like with the Roundup and all that shit, like that has the impact on it as well. But if you have like an organic sunflower seed oil, cold pressed, I don't understand how it's maybe not cooking in it, right? But even their smoke point, their boiling point, or the smoke point on sunflower seed oil, it's relatively high. That's why they do it. What do you understand the mechanism behind these seed oils that's causing? Like, do you know what specific seed oil it is that causes or is it just regular vegetable oil? What is it that causes the issue for you?
So I think it's one of those layman's terms like process that some people clump it together and some people be like, oh, well, technically this is a seed and, but they've been doing this in ancient China for 4,000 years. And so how can it possibly be bad? I think the term seed oils is generally referring to the highly processed oils that go through all of this oxidation
Okay.
and come out as an industrial bulk product. I don't necessarily think it's inherently the plant that it comes from, right? Like I think you can get, it's also the fact that vegetable oil is just this term that includes a whole bunch of stuff, like whatever the fuck you want it to be, right? Like it's not even, A, it doesn't have to be a vegetable, and B, it can be like anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you have olive oils that come from multiple locations and some that include canola oil with it. And so I think, and then you just top it off, you have, fast food restaurants that just cook it 10,000 times. And every time you cook it, it just gets worse and worse. And so I think it's almost like anything, it's how it's made, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever watched videos, like the process of making seed oils is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen, right? Like first you basically like make it into a cake and then you expel all this goo out of it that looks like you haven't changed the oil in your car in 6 years, right? Like it's dried up, it's sludgy, and then it smells so bad that you have to bleach it. And the byproduct of bleaching clay is so toxic that you can't get rid of it. You have to go put it in a landfill somewhere. And then you have to deodorize it, and then you have to colorize it, and it's just all of these things. And again, you can't tell me that you can do that with anything. Take beef and put it through that process and it won't be healthy. Oh, we do that. It's called hot dogs, right? Like the run of the mill garbage hot dogs. And so I think that's where it is, right? And it all comes down to cost. Like the cheapest thing for me to do is to go buy that canola oil in the big yellow tub. And the FDA says it's safe, so I'm not breaking any rules, and it's the most cost-effective way, and it has a high smoke point, and I can use it 1,000 times, and it kind of retains the flavor, and it actually makes everything taste super good. And so, of course, I'm going to use that, right? But yeah, if you were to go get, the most cold-pressed, organic seed oil and eat with that, you're probably going to be just fine.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the process by which we make all of these things. It's same thing with ultra processed food. You can take an inherently good product and just bastardize it to hell, and all of a sudden you have health complications.
Yeah. Okay. That explanation makes a lot of sense to me.